Public acceptance of out-of-body experiences has grown so much over the last 2 decades, 3 decades. It's unbelievable. People just accept it now. There was a time when anybody would speak about out-of-the-body experiences, and you'd get a funny look, or they'd get a funny look. And it was just something that wasn't said in public any more than you talked about sex. Dirty word, brush your teeth, gargle. It fell in that category. But anyway, Joan was listening to the radio and she heard this little story that was going on that was an illustration of how things have changed. And a little girl asked her father, she said, were you ever in a war? And he said, yeah, I was in Vietnam. And then he went on to tell her about boot camp and what it was like there, and how his sergeant had taken a particular dislike to both him and his buddy Jim. Sergeants will do that, I don't know why, but they can look at someone, they can see they're happy, they look smart, they look anything, but they don't look as if they belong to a unit of 60 other men or women. And they're going to break down the individual personality so that when it's time to operate as a unit, that these people all these individuals can give up their individuality and become part of a unit and act for the greater of the unit, for the good of the unit and all this. And well, anyway, this sergeant was down on him. And so he'd come up to him and he said, "Don't get in my face," like this, if any of you have been in service. I don't know if it's gentler and kinder today, but I went in around Vietnam time and it wasn't kind then, and I doubt if it's very kind now. And so this really wore on the girl's father and his buddy Jim, really wore on him. So as soon as they'd get out of earshot out of the sergeant, they'd look at each other. One would turn to the other and say, "Don't get in my face." And the other would laugh, and then he'd look at his buddy and look him in the eye, and he'd shout the same thing back. And so they did this. And so they went to combat, they went to Vietnam, but they came home in one piece. And then they went their separate ways. Jim went to work as a tow lift operator. And he was killed in an industrial accident. And so the girl's father felt very bad about this. And he missed Jim a whole lot. And so one night he had a dream. It was, a very special dream. He was just out floating around somewhere in this dream, and look who's coming here, floating around, just floating around in the sky out there is Jim. And as they float near to each other, Jim shouts out, he says, "Don't get in my face." So the girl's father calls back, "Don't get in my face." And then they laughed and laughed and laughed like two maniacs, just having a good time. Well, then they got to share some of the old times they had, and Jim was glad to hear that his buddy was doing well, and the girl's father was likewise assured that Jim was happy where he was and that everything was going well. And pretty soon they floated away from each other as they had said their goodbyes. And then the girl's father woke up. He said, he said to her, "I think this dream was given so that Jim and I would have a chance to say goodbye to each other." And so, you know, I just thought this was, you know, one of those beautiful dreams where the consciousness of the people today has risen or has changed so much that it can accept concepts like this.